Hi, Motheo. Alfred here. I've always felt comfortable with money and what I earn versus what I spend. But recently, I seem to be borrowing money from myself and not paying it back. I justify it by saying it won't be the same every month, but every month there seems to be a difference once off. It started off with a small amount, but it seems to be doubling every few months. My income and expenses haven't really changed during this period, and my savings have stagnated.
In today's episode, we're addressing a common issue many of us face, the slippery slope of borrowing from yourself and how it can impact your savings and financial stability. We're tackling how our own psychology can affect the decisions we make when it comes to money. From being a miser, an overspender, impulsive, and conservative, it's all driven by our psychology with money. There's a whole science behind why we handle our money the way we do. Welcome to Everything Counts. In this bi-weekly podcast series, we frank about money and the particular discussions we should all be having. How to save it, how to spend it, how to grow it, its pitfalls, and how to make it work for us. On Everything Counts, we'll share the information you need to get your financial ducks in a row. Hello, I'm Motheo Khoaripe, host of Everything Counts. In this episode, we'll try to help Alfred make sense of how he got here, and joining me to help analyze the psychology behind our money is Professor Charlene Liu, full professor at the University of Pretoria's Gordon Institute of Business, and Investec financial advisor Kgomotso. Now, to start off, Alfred seems to be caught in a pattern here, right? Pinching a little bit from his savings with the promise that he'll pay it back, but it's starting to become a pattern that's leading him to some form of debt. Now, Charlene, how do you begin to unpack the reasoning or the psychology behind our money behaviors?
Motheo, I think at the very foundation, we need to understand that Alfred has needs, like you and I have got needs. And there are specific needs that drive our money behaviors. Some of our needs are to create security, and that type of behavior drives us to try and save. But we've also got other needs. We've got needs to express love through our money. We've got needs for freedom, just the sense of I can play and I can do whatever I want to do. And some people have a need for power and they want to use money to influence results in their lives. So all of these things play together in our minds as we evaluate how we want to spend our money. And that's sometimes at the very foundation of why we behave in specific ways.
Now, Kgomotso, in your experience as a financial advisor, you must see a wide range of mindsets and personalities among clients when it comes to money. And these are deeply rooted in how we grew up and also how our mindset is set when it comes to our finances.
I think if we look at these mindsets, they come from our cultural backgrounds, how we were raised in terms of how money has impacted us growing up. I'll give you an example. Some of my clients, I've got clients who've got like a massive sense of urgency, and they sit in front of me and it's like, okay, how do I become rich really quickly? How do we get things going? I've messed up in my youth. I want to get things going. And then you get like the latter, which is quite the opposite. Someone who's a bit relaxed. You got to enjoy life. You'll figure things out over time. So a lot of these are from how we've been brought up, the challenges that we faced, the impact, what our conversations that we were having with our parents with money. That plays a massive role as well. So my job as a financial planner is to look to bridge that gap in terms of actually having structure, strive to help you to achieve your goals in a methodical way. Yeah.
Kgomotso has already touched on it, Charlene, the early experiences that we have as people and how that influences our behavior with money. Can you just take us through how Alfred could be affected by his own early experiences?
So Kgomotso made such important points about the influence of family, the conversations that we've had. But in South Africa, there are some other forces also at play. Many people have gone through a process of social mobility, having grown up in situations where they may not have had as much money. And I'm not saying this is Alfred's case, but it could be. And then once suddenly has money, it becomes a completely new dynamism in one's mind as to I want to keep this, or I want to spend, and I want to experience all the things that I never experienced growing up. So that can have a huge impact on how we go about thinking about money and behaving with money. But a lot of us also want to try and avoid the pain we experienced in our childhood through money, the pain that we saw in our parents' eyes when they were not able to provide. And that weighs heavy on many South Africans' minds.
We don't think about it, but there's often that emotional connection to money, right? Like rewarding yourself when something goes well in your life, for instance. But in some instances, you try to keep as much of it because maybe you had a form of lack when you were growing up. So that emotion that you have with money, also quite important.
Absolutely. And it's emotion, but it also becomes your identity. It becomes how you see yourself. And that drives almost everything we do in terms of money.
Important to understand that then, Kgomotso, when somebody walks into the room with you to say, this is who I am, this is how much I've got, but you go a little bit deeper to say, let's see how you've been behaving with this money before we set you on that path.
No, 100%. When I sit down with a client or speak to a client, we got to look back in terms of your relationship with money. If that's been negative, a lot of your decisions are going to be negative. You're going to be conservative. Often I'll see a client that's very young and is, you know what, I'm young, I've got the whole world in front of me, so I'll start planning for my retirement at a later stage, so we don't have to get that going. But if you had to see the difference between starting to save for retirement at age 25 and 35, it's such a massive difference. So that relationship with money, it's so crucial. Also, you get someone with a scarcity mindset. I often actually had that. Growing up with a single mom, single parent, money was always a sensitive topic. I often felt guilty when I had to ask my mom for soccer boots. I remember time also when I used to play football. I got these pair of boots and I wore these boots until they didn't fit me. Because just the thought of having to go ask my mom, knowing that things are difficult at home, would stress me out. So I'd wear these soccer boots until they didn't fit me. To the point where the coach was like, are you okay? So I think a lot of those things, Motheo, they play into that. And I can see it when we sit and when we plan things with the client. But why are you making that decision? Why are you scared to put your money in the market?
Yeah.
It often stems from backgrounds and how people are growing up.
Now, Charlene, Alfred says he's been able to save all along, nothing wrong with his income, but he's gotten into the norm of borrowing from himself, pinching from his own savings. And how does societal norms and values also affect us when it comes to our money, the pressures that comes with being, in society and trying to keep up?
Absolutely. So there are two ways in which societal norms influence us. First thing is that we tend to do what we think other people will do. Other people in our reference group or other people that we see to be similar to ourselves.
Yeah.
So maybe Alfred is going out and buying that really nice branded jacket because he sees all his peers doing it and people that he look up to doing that. But there's another driver in terms of social norms. We also tend to do what we think other people expect of us. And that is probably something Alfred can tap into, is to understand what those people who are close to him and are significant to him expect of him in terms of his behavior. So that shapes how we approach our money as well.
Alfred also expressing the fact that in the beginning he didn't really mind it. There were a lot of savings that he was taking from. The fact that he hasn't been paying back has now caused him a little bit of discomfort. He's now worried about his money position, Kgomotso, right? So that financial discomfort and comfort, where is the sweet spot there when you know you're in trouble and when you know you're in the clear?
Yeah, I'm actually going to step back. I think if you look at financial comfort, it's when you get to a place where you feel like you have sufficient income, you're kind of making the money to kind of sustain your life, you're saving enough, and there's a lot of positive. So you often even have positive spending habits, right? Because you feel empowered, you feel educated. And often I'll see with clients, clients that have got a bit of financial comfort, they'll come there with a bit of research. They've went and spoken to this individual, they've tested this, they've gone to different people. So that drives a lot of positive behavior, right? But now let's look at the opposite, the discomfort, right? So often what discomfort does, it creates a lot of fear, not knowing like what's going to happen next, it even stops you from thinking about the future and actually making financial decisions about the future.
So that desperation could change your behavior altogether.
100%.
From somebody who was investing, was saving, but now because you're at a point of discomfort, you act differently when you have the money.
Yeah, definitely. We often see it. The first thing when someone feels a bit of discomfort, they want to cancel policies. And those are the most important things. Like what we see it, like with young professionals, like young medical doctors, often see it, they'll get these big fancy cars, when they get that ComServe and that. And then when they don't get placed at a hospital or whatever the case is, first thing they'll do is cancel the insurance on the car, and then you know what happens, right? Often an accident will happen. But like that often comes from being uncomfortable. So that does influence, and it makes your decision making quite like negative, which can have a negative effect on your financial future.
Yes, I agree so much, Kgomotso. And in addition to it being discomfort, one could even describe it as pain. One could get oneself into such a situation that the pain of changing drives you to just keep doing the wrong thing. We get ourselves deeper and deeper into financial pain, and as we want to try and balance that pain with rewards. And the way to shift this, I think, is for Alfred to consider that the future pain is going to be greater than the current pain if he does not start investing or start committing himself to his investments.
Alfred talks about the fact that this was a once-off. I'll take a little bit from the money I've saved already. That impulsiveness, those purchases over a long period of time, why do we justify things like that? To say that I need this or I deserve this, and you take a little bit from yourself, right?
Yeah. There's a lot of irrationality in the way we think about time. One thing that we tend to do is we think that smaller, immediate gains brings us greater rewards than later larger gains. We discount the fact that there's a future. And this has been shown so often that even if we know that the rewards will be bigger if we wait, we tend to value these smaller, quicker gains. And that's a way of irrational thinking that we apply. But that's not the only way. There are some other ways we do that. We, for instance, sometimes think that if we keep investing in projects that are failing, somehow they will turn around. That's called sunk cost fallacy. I imagine maybe Alfred's got a girlfriend or somebody that he's interested in, and he's now borrowed a bit of money from himself and invested it in a nice dinner with this girl. She's not interested. And now he thinks, because of sunk cost fallacy, that if he continues to give her bigger and larger gifts, eventually he's going to be able to shift her thinking. And many of these things play in our minds that we think we're rational, but we actually behave in very irrational ways when we make decisions about money.
What is the opposite of that, where you try and keep your money as much as you can? You don't want to invest it, you don't want to move it, you don't want to spend a cent.
Well, that is just simple hoarding behavior, and there is that was also stemmed from a deep fear of not having enough. And it may have been a negative life experience that has triggered that hoarding behavior, that you are unable to spend and you just keep adding on more without any plan for the future.
Kgomotso, in practice, how do you get them in a place where they see the rationality of financial wellness, firstly, but also how investing can actually make their life a bit more comfortable?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we look to do is kind of show clients the future. Things like power of compounding interest, what things look like at retirement, cost inflation, cost of things. My role is to bridge that gap of actual reality of how things actually will look and actually where the client is.
Well, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, I'll be asking Professor Lou how Alfred can break this habit, and she'll share one technique you can start practicing today to get back on track.
Whether you're saving for security or investing for growth, Investec gives you access to the right tools and expert financial advice, all in one place. Chat with your Investec private banker or financial advisor. Now that's private banking.
And we're back here on Everything Counts, talking about our psychology and how our early experiences in life can influence how we handle our money. Now, Charlene, if left unchecked, right, impulsive spending can result in debt, or a debt trap, if you will. And when you're treating your savings this way, you're essentially borrowing money from your future self. So what psychological effect could rising debt have on an individual?
Thanks, Motheo. I was listening carefully to Alfred, and it really sounds like he's becoming aware that he's losing control. That's often accompanied by a deep sense of anxiety. And that anxiety, ironically, drives more irrational spending behavior. We start doing stupid things sometimes. And when we do that, that even escalates further, and it starts affecting how we see ourselves, our own image, our own identity, and could ultimately end up in a deep sense of depression. And that's just in ourselves. Externally, we all know that starts impacting the relationships we have. We start borrowing money here from ourselves and thinking that it's not affecting anybody else, but those around us become highly affected by the insecurity that we introduce in that situation. And that could even spill over into the workplace environment where we don't perform at the levels we want to. Now, that's a very negative debt cycle, but as soon as we feel that we've lost control, that cycle can kick into place.
Then, Kgomotso, how do you walk a client back from that type of behavior? They were previously a good saver, they were investing, they started a bad habit, they found themselves now in a little bit of debt, and they come to you and say, look, I'd like to get things right. Please walk me back to the person I was when I was still quite disciplined in putting away my money.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few strategies that we would look at, but I think a really good place to start is budgeting. I think some people overlook the importance of having budgeting because it creates structure, right? You kind of see where your behaviors are. Because sometimes we set a budget, but when you look back at that budget, actually you've done nothing that you've set on that budget. You've gone above, you've just spent more, you've just drafted it, but we often don't even go back. So I think what a budget does, it'll create structure. That's your foundation. I think once you've got the structure, you want to then build up your savings, and then you can start doing all the flamboyant stuff. Start going to the market, putting money away. But budgeting is a good place to start. Set goals. I think a lot of clients or people don't actually set goals for themselves to say, well, in a year's time, I would like to be on a holiday. How do I get there? I think that's very important. I think also things that you can do on your banking apps these days allow for that. Automatic savings where you can set up a monthly debit order. It goes into a particular fund or a savings account. That's also very important. It allows you to.
For that moment,
yes,
you're doing well.
It's structured. It's there every month. I think also just a bit of education and awareness. That's also very important. How can I educate myself a bit more so I can start making better decisions? So also some of the things, just limiting certain things. You know very well. Going to the mall with your credit card.
What you're overdoing.
Yeah. You know how that can influence you. End of season sales. You know how that. I often say, well, limit your exposure to those things. We've got online shopping now where you can do your deliveries, get it done. You don't go to the mall and you're not exposed to that.
Take your banking details off that website to get yourself back on track.
Yeah.
Now, when we talk about the practical strategies that someone can use, Alfred at this point obviously has to identify there is a problem. In terms of the psychology of walking yourself back, how do you forgive yourself for having taken away from your own savings, disappointed yourself, let yourself down when it comes to your goal, and psychologically being prepared to get on a good financial path again?
That's such a good question, Motheo. A starting point is to forgive oneself, as you rightfully say, about the past, but start today. Don't get trapped in that cycle. And I find it useful for people to ask themselves a couple of very pertinent questions. The one question is, how involved am I really in my money? Do I really, really know what's happening on all fronts in my money? Just that accountability of being aware. Another question is, what will my future self want? What plans today will put me into the position that I can live the life that I want to in future? For those closer to retirement, those questions become very significant. But it's, as we all know, and as Kgomotso will tell us, it's not something we want to delay, because very few of us are ready for that time when retirement comes. Also, a very important question is, do I have enough knowledge about how money works? We can all educate ourselves a lot more about how money works. And then a final question I'd encourage Alfred and other people to ask themselves is, what skills do I want to develop around budgeting, around planning, and who can I bring in to help me with that?
And Prof, I think that's such an important point.
Yeah.
I think we forget partnering, right? And it's always important to have a sound financial board. You can bounce ideas. And we often forget that, whether it's in your spouse, whether it's someone who's trusted. I would always say professional, but that is such a key point, because some of the decisions we make there, we make with a lack of knowledge, thinking that, okay, there's a get-rich-quick scheme, I can put a bit of money in there, and then it turns out it's not. And so I always say that partnering piece that Prof is speaking about is so crucial. And I think my journey is, I often will have clients who will go different stages of their life, whereas you were married before and your spouse kind of made all the decisions, so you weren't really involved. So you didn't have to educate yourself. You didn't have to invest in terms of what is credit, what is debt, what is offshore, onshore, all these things.
You just earned money.
You just earned money.
To see
and then now your partner's no more there. It's like, okay, well, now you have to step up and kind of start making those decisions for yourself. And Prof speaks about the importance of actually financial literacy and actually educating oneself. There's so much content out there. Now, you can almost chat GPT anything. So I think that is such a massive point that Prof brings up there.
I think you make a great point in terms of having a professional accountability partner in a financial advisor, because often the people in our lives also have their own lives, and they forget to keep you accountable to yourself when it comes to money. Maybe they have a soft spot for you and they let you get away with some things, but a professional person like a financial advisor will remind you, professionally of course, that look, you're not sticking to what you said we're going to do. Maybe it's best we find other ways of making sure we get you there.
No, 100%. And I think that having that accountability partner, it will allow for truthfulness. And I think if we look at debt cycles and people getting into debt, it's often a bit of shame, a bit of disgrace and things that you want to talk about. And I think having that partner, the correct partner, will have the truthful conversations. And that's where good decision making will come, where we're having honest conversation about our money habits and how we're spending our money. So that is a key, crucial point in financial planning.
And it's sometimes somebody external to your closest friends that is most independent and that you can trust, that they're there for you.
Yeah. When the situation seems impossible, Charlene, how do I decide now, okay, I feel I'm in a habit where I might need professional help in terms of maybe some therapy to deal with, my upbringing and how I treat money myself, or maybe to try and figure out what's happening in my mind psychologically that's making me get into this behavior. At what point do you decide, okay, I need professional help?
When you feel that the money is controlling you rather than you controlling the money. And you would know. Or when you feel such a sense of despair that you are not able to function yourself. That's for the extreme side of things. But all of us at some stage, and even in our normal day-to-day life, if we don't have somebody that we are partnering with, we need to reach out to somebody.
Yeah. I hate asking one-tip things because there's so much to cover now, but I want to put your head on the block, Charlene, in terms of that one simple tip that our listeners, including Alfred, can start using today to increase their financial mindfulness.
That's so powerful. Yes, we often try and save by adding numbers to our bank account. But those numbers are abstract. My one tip for being more accountable with your money is have a clear vision that's inspiring, an image of your future that is so inspiring that when you see it, up there on your fridge or on your mirror that you know there's nothing that will stop you from reaching that goal.
Yeah. And that vision part is so important, right? I think setting goals actually drives behaviors, because, I mean, it's one thing to put 500 Rand away every month, but like, what's it for? We often say, and I see it with clients, you know, the minute I say, let's plan for your child's education, it's a different emotional connection to their goal, because like you cherish your kids so much and you want to give them a good financial future. So I agree with Prof in terms of having a vision that's actually pulls you so much towards that.
Well, I feel like we've just scratched the surface of the underlying influences into our attitudes towards money, but we've all learned a lot on this particular podcast. Thank you to Professor Charlene Lu and Kgomotso Motloung for a valuable discussion. Next time on Everything Counts, we have a question from Jody.
Hi Motheo, it's Jody here. I'm 48 and I started saving for retirement about 10 years ago, a little bit more. I used to think I was on track, as I had planned to retire at around 65 and then I was going to live off my savings for the rest of my life. I thought maybe 15 more years. Now I'm worried that if I live to 90, it really won't be enough. So can you help me? What are my options?
If, like Jody, you'd like your money question answered by our experts, you can send it to us using the hashtag EverythingCounts. See you in a fortnight.
The views expressed are those of the contributors at the time of publication and do not necessarily represent the views of the firm and should not be taken as advice or recommendations. Investec Private Banking, a division of Investec Bank Limited, a registered credit provider committed to the Code of Banking Practice as regulated by the Ombudsman for Banking Services.